Welcome to the Fallon Forum today. And gosh, I look a little ministerial today, don't I? Yes, says my producer, Maddie. You're fired. You're not supposed to agree with me. You're supposed to say, oh no, you look like a man. I don't know. Never mind. You look like your usual crazy biking self. But no, I look like a minister, I guess, today, which is okay because we have a ministerial type on our show with us today. That's Ron Yarnell. Before we talk to him, I want to thank our show sponsors, three nonprofit groups that are doing great work in this world. The Great March for Climate Action, also the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, and Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility. And a tip of the cap to Gateway Marketing Cafe for sponsoring this segment of our program. And thanks to a few of our business supporters, Tinker Heating and Cooling. Yes, that's that time of the year where you might want to take a look at your air conditioning unit. Give Tinker a shout. He's been doing this stuff for 30 years and knows his way around your furnace or air conditioning unit. Also, I want to thank Hawk Restaurant at East 5th and Walnut in the East Village District. The owners there are amazing. They get 90% of their food from local farms and local producers. Also, remember, coming up in November, it's a ways away yet, but get it on your calendar, the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit at Drake University. Okay, so in addition to having Ron on the show today, we're going to discuss fracking and climate change with Matt Oloff. And fresh back from a trip to Washington, D.C. after a long legislative session, State Representative Dan Kelly will talk about his networking with state legislators across the country on some key environmental issues. But first, we welcome Ron Yarnell to the program. We're going to talk a little bit about education and local control. But first, I think Ron wants to ask the question that a lot of us have on our minds. To the anti-government folks out there, yes, Frank from Des Moines, that would include you, what kind of government do you envision as we move into this very different, strange, and new climate era?
Well, first, Ed, I want to wish you a happy D-Day because today is June 6th.
D-Day?
D-Day.
Okay.
And D-Day is symbolic of turning things around and snatching victory from the jaws of defeat and all kinds of things. So, I don't know, I think that's a nice metaphor, don't you?
Happy D-Day. And June 6th was also the date of my primary election for governor.
There you go.
Interestingly.
There you go. On the downside, it's also the 45th anniversary of the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy.
I had forgotten that as well.
But I got a Kennedy quote that I think you'll like. Kennedy said this on June 6, 1966. "Few will have the greatness to bend history, but each of us can work to change a small portion of the events, and then the total, all these acts, will be written into the history of this generation."
All right.
So I like that.
Nice.
Cool. Question arose with Frank, and I don't know if Frank's going to call in today, but he's certainly invited to do so. He's concerned that moving towards a greener industrial base, moving towards greener energy sources, moving away from fossil fuel, that will involve bigger government. And my question is, what kind of government does he foresee, does anyone foresee, in the world where there's increasing environmental instability, where you got 7 billion people, plus 7 billion people and moving up, competing for scarce resources? What kind of government can you imagine might emerge to keep a lid on the pressures that we can foresee happening? And I don't know if I don't foresee the advance of personal liberty or personal freedom in that political environment. I don't know about anyone else.
One world government. Isn't that what we want, Ron?
Well, we already have that.
We communist types just want the whole thing turned over to the UN, right?
We already have that. It's called the United States government.
One world government. Well, I'm not sure that's any. I think actually we're very, very quickly turning over a lot of our sovereignty to China. I'm more worried about China than I am the United Nations.
Well, China's a good example. China is, 1.5 billion people?
It's a big chunk of the world's
and
population.
A lot of them, and most of them, and even more of them, they want to live like Americans are perceived as living. They're very industrious people. They're claiming a huge portion of the world's resources. Right. They're working, they're building.
Even Americans want to live like Americans are living.
Right.
And there's a big chunk of us that don't.
And this is Thomas Friedman's thesis, and I guess you can disagree with it, but a lot of people in the world want to live how they perceive Americans as living or Western Europeans as living, and that's all fine and dandy, but what kind of strain does that put on resources?
Western Europeans live a lot differently than Americans, and more so. I mean, you've got 30% of the population in the Netherlands bike to work every day. You have folks who are used to smaller living areas, tighter communities, more protected green spaces, farmland, wilderness areas. And you've got people who are used to traveling by train as well. I mean, it's a very different culture and climate.
You certainly don't have the, and this might ultimately be our undoing, our surplus of resources that we kind of believe to be an entitlement. That's may not be the case much longer. The Europeans have learned to live with scarcer natural resources, maximize what they have, be competitive who they are, and with what they got. I believe Germany, for example, is the second or third largest exporting country in the world. And how big is Germany? It's not really,
75 million people,
but
fairly small geographically as well.
With very limited natural resources.
Right.
So we're living in a world that's becoming increasingly competitive for scarce resources, and there are a lot of people excluded from the prosperity. There are 7 billion people in the world. A large chunk are on the edge of disaster. That's where they live constantly. So if you add increasing environmental instability to that, what are the political implications? What kind of government comes out of that? I don't see a government that advances individual liberty or personal freedom. I see a government that's more authoritarian.
That's not a good thing.
That's not a good thing.
I don't think that necessarily has to be the case. I think you can have a government that is more cooperative with other governments because it has to be.
Well,
I mean, how do you
more democratic with its own people? And I see how I can understand. I get how working towards greener energy sources can enable that. I understand that, but I don't understand how ignoring a problem, how ignoring the natural environment, allowing it to be increasingly damaged, how that helps the cause of personal freedom and individual liberty.
No, you're absolutely right. It doesn't indeed. I mean, and you can get, again, if you have a total national sovereignty, you can have countries, rogue nations that get away with whatever they want. They just schlep their pollution, their carbon, their trash off onto the next country downwind or downstream. And, that's unacceptable, and it's happening now, of course.
You were talking about China. The last time I heard, China and Denmark, Western Europe and China, are leading the world in, for example, wind-produced energy. And my question is, shouldn't the United States be leading the world in those kinds of things? I mean, we certainly have enough area.
No, it's part of our manifest destiny to lead the world in every way, shape, and form. Well, whether it be economics, culture,
and
or
that's the thing.
baseball.
You know what? When you keep saying that you're number one, you really have to be number one.
Right. I know. Yeah, you've got to step up to the plate to continue the baseball reference.
Right.
Yeah. So, it really is a question. I mean, there's a big anti-government movement out there, and again, a big chunk of me is anti-government. I mean, I get tired of seeing government get so involved in areas of our life where they have no business. I mean, I talk to my small business friends. I mean, I'm kind of fortunate because I don't have any property. As a small business owner, I'm pretty much my laptop, my cell phone in the studio.
Welcome to the 21st century.
Well, I know, yeah, but it's a nice place to be when it comes to the intrusions of government on small businesses. I mean, government on one hand has become really, really good at doling out incredible amounts of tax money to big businesses, to giving them all sorts of preferential treatment. Mm-hmm. Yet on the other hand, the little guy is getting trounced more and more, whether it's exorbitant liquor licenses, ridiculous fees to, for example, to put a table and chair in front of your cafe, overburdened inspections that seem to be clearly designed, in my opinion, just to keep some government bureaucrat employed. I mean, these are the kind of things that make a lot of folks anti-government. The challenge, I think, is to balance that legitimate criticism with the need to have a government that makes sure that a polluter or even a polluting nation is not trouncing on its neighbor. Would you concur with that?
I would concur with the sure, why not, but how do you do it? I mean, you really, the way nation states are organized, you can't make a country do anything it doesn't want to do or do something that you want it to do. No,
there is the World Court. The UN has certain power, sanctions. The problem with the UN is the Security Council. The Security Council is an abomination.
The UN doesn't have any power. The U.S. doesn't give it.
Right. Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah.
And also, the United Nations is designed to defend, actually, national sovereignty. It's designed to defend the status quo that comes out of the Treaty of Westphalia, 1648, which established the nation state as an entity.
This is a fairly dark prognosis, Frank. I mean, I just called you Frank. Oh, my
goodness. Oh, please.
But because Frank's on the phone. Do we want to go to Frank on the phone or not? Yeah. Ron, I'll let you make the call.
Sure. We asked him to call in.
Frank, I hate to do this to us, but welcome to the
show. I'm glad for the heads up, guys. Appreciate somebody that at least allows me in the conversation out of their own free will.
Providing you talk better on my program than you do on my Facebook page.
Well, yeah. I try to realize where I'm at when I'm speaking.
So you can. Okay. Anyway, we're not going to get into that.
Well, okay. A couple of things. Let me start with Ron, and then I want to get to something you said, Ed. Ron, in the early part of the 1800s, if your father lived on the East Coast and you lived, let's say in the foundings of California, and your father died, what do you think the chances was that you was going to get to his funeral?
Marginal.
Okay. Number one, there was no embalming in them days. Number two, there was no aircraft and there was no cars. So I reject the notion that you put forward, because automobiles and airplanes gave man a lot of freedom, a lot of personal freedom that they had never had before. When you can jump in your car and you can go over borders and you don't have to pull out a passport or some kind of identification papers to show, I want to cross from Indiana into Michigan and Michigan into Chicago, or into Illinois, whatever. I want to travel across the United States.
Actually, sorry, Frank, but Michigan does not border Illinois. But
I know that. I'm just talking about.
You're just bad at geography, is what you're saying.
No, I know what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I travel.
Just keep saying that, Frank.
Any number of races up at Michigan. I go Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan.
All right.
There's times I had to deviate up into Chicago for a particular purpose, but the bottom line is that gave man a intense amount of personal freedom they never had before, from mass transportation.
That's true, and with that freedom comes a responsibility, and you could question whether or not we are adequately exercising that responsibility.
This is my question, Frank. How does this have anything to do with what I'm talking about?
Well, because you started to go down a road that if we stay, I guess if I'm following your logic, if we stay locked up in this fossil fuel, we're in bondage, and somehow if we explore this new green energy, we're going to be set free. Freedom. I mean, you're saying one thing is bondage and something else is freedom.
No.
I'm not
Frank,
saying
Frank, this is what I'm asking. In a world where resources are scarce and the natural environment increasingly unstable, what kind of government do you foresee emerging? Is it going to be a government that advances individual liberty and personal freedom?
Well, I know one thing, Ron. China has already made a statement that they will fight for oil. And
apparently they'll fight for pork as well.
And I'm pretty sure the United States' unspoken foreign policy is we will fight for it too, because I believe
it's not an unspoken foreign policy. It's called the Carter Doctrine.
Because I believe that's what the kerfuffle was over in northern tip of Africa, was getting oil through the Gulf of the Mediterranean Gulf, getting oil out of Africa. I believe that's what that was all about.
You're not answering my question. What kind of government do you foresee emerging in the world in which it's tougher to survive for most people? What kind of government do you think will arise?
Let me turn the question on you. Can it get any? Do you think it's going to get more radical than it is now?
What do you mean by radical?
Well, right now you seem to think that the big United States is oppressing third world countries, stealing, raping, robbing, pillaging.
When did I say this, Frank? When did I make this statement?
Huh?
When did I make these statements?
That's the general sense I get from you.
That's what you get, Frank. That's not anything I've said so far.
Okay, I'm inviting you to tell me to disagree with what I'm saying.
With what, Frank? You're not answering my question. I want to know what kind of government do you foresee arising in a world in which it's more difficult for most people to survive?
I don't see it being any worse or better than it is right now.
You don't think so? You don't think that?
And I actually think it's going to get better, because it has to get better. It has to be more cooperative.
No, it doesn't have to get better.
I can't prove a negative. If I tell my wife or somebody to take a letter to the post office because I'm so compulsive and anal that I think if I put it in my mailbox out here that somebody might come along in the middle of the night and hit my mail post and my letter goes floating down the road into somebody's wet ditch and disappears, how can I prove a
Frank,
negative?
I'm trying to ask you a question, and you're taking me with your mail into a puddle.
And I've got to go. I've got to go.
Hey,
Frank, I've got to go to a break.
And hang on. I want to get to you about your Manifest Destiny comments, so please bring me back.
You can't even answer Ron's question. You talk about letters falling into puddles. You talk about...
I told him. I answered his question. I don't think it's going to be any better or worse than it is now. Now, it's his turn to rebut my statement.
But I've got to run to a break, so let me do that. We'll put you back on hold.
All right.
I've got to go to a break. We've got plenty of time today. We've got a lot more to talk about as well, including fracking and climate change, including Dan Kelly's trip to D.C. and the environmental stuff going on there across the country, and also Ron has some kind of harebrained opinion about local control and education, so we'll try to leave time for that as well. I do want to thank Gateway Market again for sponsoring this segment of our show. We had the weekly climate walk last night, started Gateway Market. Bunch of us had supper. We walked for 5.5 miles. A bunch of us finished off with gelato. It's a great place for a lot of things, folks. Not just groceries, not just a cafe, not just a catering service, but a great meeting point for ending and starting walks. Anyway, I want to thank Tally's Restaurant, Bar, and Catering, where I hope to have dinner tonight. Tally's is up in Beaverdale, and again, a fantastic selection of very creative dishes provided by owner Robert Sanda. I want to thank Diana's Wedding Cake, and I think we finally put the pressure on Maddie to get a wedding cake from Diana's for her wedding. Woohoo! This is true?
I have to call her still.
Get on it.
I know.
All right. I want to thank Matthew Shepard, the Matthew Shepard Awards Dinner, which is coming up tomorrow night here in the Convention Center in Des Moines. They're also a sponsor of this program, and I want to again remind you we'll be back in just a couple minutes, 2-minute break, and we're back to our conversation here in the Fallon Forum.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of webcast1live.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going, man.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
So much news, so little time. My gosh, so much going on. Stephanie Rose in big trouble. No, do not compare yourself to Hulk Hogan if you're a judge. That's, ouch. That's going to get worse before it gets better, I think, because it looks like she might have actually been referencing a federal prosecutor. Anyway, it's not going to be good for her, I don't think. But again, don't let it be tried in the press. Let's see where else it goes. Also, throwing their weight around, the Chinese pork industry wanting to buy Iowa, basically. We'll see where that goes. We're going to talk more about that in the coming days. Tomorrow, Andrew Rasmussen is going to join me to talk education. And my old buddy, Tony Bizignano, great guy, except that he's got this just genetic defect that causes him to like the New York Yankees. But anyway, he'll be on tomorrow. He's running for the state Senate. We'll have plenty more to talk about besides those programs as well. Later in the program, Dan Kelly is going to join me fresh off his trip to Washington, D.C. to network with environmental legislators across the country. And shortly, we're going to talk with Matt Olaf with Food and Water Watch. I want to thank the Matthew Shepard Scholarship Awards Dinner for sponsoring this segment of our show, and also remind folks to support the businesses that believe in this alternative. Fighting Burrito, for example, owned by Matthew Goodman, a location in Ames, and one here right in Des Moines on 13th and 13th and Locust. Again, custom-made burritos for a very affordable price. I want to remind you about Story County Veterinary Clinic in Ames. Dr. Kim Holding has been doing work on pets for a long time, over 30-plus years. She will take care of your critter as she has taken care of mine. And, of course, Ritual Cafe, a longtime supporter of this program at 13th and Locust as well. Check them out for coffee, tea, paninis, and all sorts of vegetarian fare as well, and great music. Okay, back to our conversation. Ron, we're going to have to get back to this dialogue later about the type of government we can expect to see in the new climate era. But I want to give you just a minute to tell me, you've been bringing up something about education and local control, and we're going to talk more about education tomorrow. But what is your take?
It really requires probably another day. My question is, what is the fetish we have as a country about local control? Why do we see local control as so significant? Because I don't get it, especially in a globalized world. In a globalized world, is there a difference between on algebra between Iowa and Mississippi? I need more information. I need more answers.
No, well, yeah, I mean, historically, I think it's worked pretty well. You elect the people who manage the school district that teaches your kids. Yeah, I mean, I'm for minimal amount of state involvement and even less federal involvement. I think it works pretty well. And you might have a school district that is crazy talk and people who just have a wacky idea. And you know what? Parents will take their kids elsewhere, and that district will eventually improve.
Unless they're stuck there, which happens to a lot of people.
Well, unless you're open. I mean, you got to have a provision for open enrollment so the kids can't have an out.
So now you gotta drive your kids across town, maybe to another town.
Maybe not. Maybe you happen to be going that way for work anyhow. Or in the case of Des Moines, for example, there are kids living just across from Hoover High School who are actually in the Johnston School District. You know, so they've got to go to Johnston. They've got to be bused to Johnston when they could walk to Hoover otherwise. So in some cases, open enrollment makes more sense.
Johnston's a great place to go.
Well, I'm sure you think that. Nice purple
this is
shirt you have on there, by the way. All right. So, we could talk more about this because I
don't think it's practical in a global economy. I don't see how having different areas of the country adhere to different standards, emphasize different things. I don't really understand how that makes sense when you have, as we talked about the Chinese, you have millions of Chinese kids, you have millions of Indian kids, you have millions of kids generally around the world.
Well, by that logic, why not make one world education system?
Because we don't run the world in that sense.
But you're talking about because of globalization, we should have one system.
Shouldn't we see the United States in the competition? And in the competition against people who are very serious about that competition. And I see our decentralized system as an indication we're not really serious about it.
I don't think education should be about competition or about preparing people for the workforce. I think education should be about learning how to think critically. That's what our school system should be focused on.
If you learn to think critically, you have a competitive edge.
Okay, fine. But focus on thinking critically. because that not only helps you in the economy,
and that's a
but
discussion
elsewhere.
about content, and that's another conversation too. Because I'm a little concerned that we're emphasizing the mechanics of reading and math, but we're really shy about cultural content.
Right. You may have to call into tomorrow's program with Andrew Rasmussen.
Maybe.
If you'll be calling in, so I don't have to look at that ridiculous hat. I thought at first Ron had seen the light, had come around, left the dark side, was wearing a Boston Red Sox hat, but no, he assures me that's a Brooklyn Dodgers hat.
Well, first of all, Ed, I would have no major issue with wearing a Red Sox hat if I visited Fenway and saw a game there.
Well, it's a lot safer to do that.
Okay. But it's a Brooklyn Dodgers hat because the Brooklyn Dodgers represent New York baseball, which, as you know, is sort of the center of baseball.
I don't know. To me, it sounds like a name of a team that should have been playing dodgeball, not baseball. Anyway,
you're just being like this today, Ed.
Well, I'm like this every day, I'm afraid. All right, hey, Ron Yarnell, thank you for joining us. Ron, if he doesn't have an opinion about something, he's got two of them. Fair enough.
Fair enough.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Hey, I want to switch gears. We'll have Matt Olaf with us for this segment and a little bit into the next segment as well. We've got some issues to cover there relevant to climate change and fracking. Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for having me. Step right up to that mic, Matt.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you now.
All right.
What is Food and Water Watch?
Food and Water Watch, we're a national consumer advocacy organization. We're based in D.C., but we have 16 satellite offices around the country, and we're fortunate enough to have one here in Des Moines.
Okay.
Yeah, so we advocate to protect our essential food and water resources. We work on a variety of issues related to food, water issues, and what we're going to talk about today is fracking. Although fracking does not happen here in Iowa, we don't have the rock deposits for that. Fracking happens in other states like Pennsylvania.
But it is a huge issue here in Iowa because of what's going on in the northeast part of the state. We've had several people on the show talking about the impact of fracking in Winnebago County, in Clayton County as well, and certainly in Alameda County, where they have put an 18-month moratorium in place. That's an encouraging first start. And again, it's not fracking per se, but it's sand mining sand for the fracking process.
Correct. So up in northeast Iowa, Alameda County, they have the silica sand, which is the sand that's used for fracking. It's a soft, round sand that's used in the fracking process, but the silica sand mining itself is very harmful. If it gets in the air, it potentially causes silicosis if it's inhaled, and that's a naturally occurring carcinogen, could cause cancer. So there's some serious health repercussions as a result of silica sand mining, sand mining. Like you said, Alameda County, very northeast corner of the state, just passed an 18-month moratorium. That's a temporary moratorium, and they're not sure what they're going to do after that, and they really have to take their lead from the state. So we're pushing for state legislation to ban sand mining because we don't believe it can be done safely.
What happened with that during this past legislative session?
It didn't go anywhere. There were a couple hearings in the natural resources committees, but there was no legislation.
Any word from Branstad as to where he stands on this issue?
We do not know.
He hasn't said anything.
No.
How about Chuck Gipp, who again used to represent Alameda and Winnebago County in the legislature, now head of the Iowa Department of Natural Resources?
Right.
You would think Gipp might be a little bit sensitive to the local sentiment on this.
Possibly. DNR essentially follows the regulations that are on the books, so I haven't heard anyone from DNR advocate any changes to the rules. So that's why we need legislators to take a stand.
Which legislators are stepping forward on this?
I don't know. Chuck Eisenhart is the one. Representative Eisenhart from Dubuque is the one who held the hearings. Right. Representative Wessel Crochelle from Ames was present, as were several others.
What about the new state rep from Alameda County?
Do you know who that is?
I'm blanking on the name right now, but it's someone who replaced John Beard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not.
I would think again, Winnebago County is pretty mixed politically. It can go either way, Democrat, Republican. Mm-hmm. Alamede's pretty Republican, and Alameda County has the stronger position against sand mining.
Right.
Which, I mean, it should tell you this is a bipartisan concern.
Right, and that's why we need those legislators that represent those districts to take a stand and introduce legislation to ban sand mining. Obviously, the people in Alameda County want it to be banned. They're the ones who got the moratorium in place, and we need their legislators to follow suit.
Folks, if you want to join the conversation at any point, and I meant to give this number out when Ron was with me, but Frank has it memorized. So, hey, call 244-0077. That's 244-0077. Or toll free 855-244-0077. Or you can email me at fallonforum@gmail.com. I will check email during the breaks. I do want to again thank Matthew Shepard, the Matthew Shepard Awards dinner, for sponsoring this segment of our show, and remind you it's not too late to get tickets to this event. Alicia Claypool will be honored for her longtime commitment to civil rights. We'll also have a keynote address from the parents of Matthew Shepard, Judy and Dennis Shepard. That's extremely, quite an honor for us to have that happening. And we will also recognize some of the young students, the young people in high schools around the state who are GLBT students who have done a great job helping move the state toward equality. I want to thank some of my other sponsors as well. S&P Piano. S&P Piano has moved my piano way more times than they'd like to remember, but they move anybody's piano anywhere in the country. Give them a shout. Details on how to contact S&P on my website. Also, I want to thank Dan Kelly and his real estate business. Dan has been selling and buying properties in Newton for a while, and he knows the turf there really well. If you have any interest in moving to, or if you got to move from, unfortunately, from Newton, give Dan Kelly a shout. And I want to thank Sergeant's Garage as well. They're at 6th and College, just north of downtown Des Moines. They've been working on 4 generations of Fallon mobiles, and they've done a fine job. One of them, I can't believe how well it runs, at 237,000 miles. Anyway, folks, we'll be back in a few minutes talking more with Matt Olaf about the fracking and climate change issue. We haven't really talked about how fracking and natural gas relates to climate change. We're going to get into that in a bit. And then Dan Kelly himself will be joining us in the studio.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
The dawn of a new era begins.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
That's Max Wellman, folks, bringing us some fantastic music here in Des Moines on a regular basis. Max Wellman's Trio. I want to thank the $1 Million Marathon for sponsoring this segment of our show. And also thank Sid's Catering for their contribution to the Fallon Forum. That's the brainchild of Sid Cohn, a great catering service. So you can find out more about that online at Catering by Sid. And I want to remind you about the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit. Speaking of great businesses, if you have a great business idea, you can learn a lot about how to put that together at the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit, which is coming up November 9th, a long ways away, but get it on your calendar. Hey, before I go back to our conversation with Matt Olaf, I got to welcome Nikisha Phillips to the show. Nikisha's on the phone with us. Nikisha, welcome. Oh, she's not. She's calling back. Ah, got it. Okay. Maddie, keep me on task here, will you? Hard to do. We are going to go to Matt Olaf. Matt, welcome back to the show. We've been talking fracking and climate change. We've mostly been talking fracking and the local environmental hazards, but some paint natural gas as the answer to the problem with fossil fuel causing so much carbon emissions.
Right.
Why? I mean, I'm not convinced. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, you said carbon emissions, and that's the distinction, is because fracking releases methane gas, which is a well-known greenhouse gas, and it's actually more potent than carbon emissions. There's been studies by Cornell University, by the EPA, which shows that these methane emissions, not only is methane increase a larger greenhouse gas than carbon, but because of the way that fracking takes place, a lot of this methane escapes because they're breaking open the rocks, and they're not able to capture all of the methane gas.
So it isn't just in the burning of natural gas that the methane is released. It's in the extraction of the gas itself, the fracking process.
This new fracking process, exactly, that not all of it's captured, so some of that does escape and gets into the natural environment.
And the reason this new fracking process is needed is because it's harder to extract the natural gas that's deeper in the earth. Is that it?
Well, it's just that they've been working on this technology. The oil and gas industry have been working on this technology for decades, and they finally found an economically feasible way to extract natural gas from shale rock formations. Like I said, we don't have those rock formations in Iowa, but they do exist in other parts of the country. Pennsylvania's a prime example.
Right.
So that's why this happened. In 2005, you may remember, if you were paying attention, under the Bush...
I was always paying attention, man. I was paying attention before you were born, kiddo.
Right. 2005, under the Bush administration, the Energy Task Force exempted fracking, the practice of fracking, from the Clean Air Act and the Safe Drinking Water Act. So these are very serious human health concerns that are currently not being regulated under those regulations.
Yeah. So the again the argument is that the natural gas doesn't produce carbon. Clearly, that's not the right question, because methane is perhaps even more toxic to the atmosphere than carbon.
Right.
So again, you would argue that in addition to the local environmental concerns, the bigger issues of how natural gas affects the climate should put it in the category of things we need to be moving beyond.
Exactly. This is not a transition energy source. This is a delay and possibly a more harmful energy source.
Yeah, interesting. So are there does Food and Water Watch have a position on how we move from fossil fuels to renewables?
We need to invest in renewable energy sources. You know, we're at a tipping point right now, and we need the public infrastructure there to support clean, renewable energy across the country.
What do you mean by public infrastructure?
You know, grids, and we do need to make sure that our renewable energy sources are economically feasible. So ultimately, we don't get involved in the debate about the specific policies of getting the renewable energy sources in place. We're essentially saying that fracking cannot be done safely, and that it's essentially a lot of myths about fracking out there that we need to rebut, and that we need a ban on fracking. In New York State right now, there's a moratorium. Governor Cuomo, New York's governor, is considering ending that moratorium. We're putting pressure on him to keep that moratorium in place.
Really?
He's considering, and ultimately a ban, but keeping the moratorium in place. He's considering running for president, and we're letting him know that even in places like Iowa that sets the tone for the presidential election, that we're watching what he does in New York State in regards to fracking.
Okay. Well, good work. I appreciate it. Yeah. And if folks want to get more information about your organization and
visit our website, it's Food and Water Watch, all spelled out, foodandwaterwatch.org. And to let people know, there's a coalition called Americans Against Fracking. We're having a national conference call tonight. You can find out the call-in information on our website. The director of the documentary Gasland, Josh Fox, will be on that call, and he's about to release a new documentary called Gasland 2, which is supposed to be better than the original Gasland.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that's congratulations on that. And again, folks, that's something you might consider participating in. Before we run to a quick break and welcome Dan Kelly to the show here, we've got Nikisha Phillips on the line. How can I not welcome Nikisha Phillips to the show? This is your usual spot. But you have something has happened.
Yeah,
you lost a lot of weight.
I did. I gave birth on Monday, the 3rd. So
congratulations.
Thank you. He was a week early, but
a week early. That's not too bad.
No, it wasn't. But he's pretty awesome.
And he is, I believe, Oliver is his name?
Yes, his name is Oliver Michael Kane Huffman.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. He was born 20 inches long and 7 pounds 8 ounces. So he's doing good.
Yeah.
So we get to leave today. I had to have a C-section.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it happens, and it so happens that I did push for 2 hours to try to get him out, but he wasn't going anywhere.
He wasn't going anywhere. Yeah. Well,
no.
Strong-willed kid. He'll make a strong-willed adult, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I think Jess and I are okay with that.
Good.
So.
Yeah. Well, good. Now, your work with a doula, with a midwife, that all was very helpful.
Yeah, it was. Nikki Pratty, who was our doula, was amazing. She really was what helped both Jess and I through. We had to switch doulas kind of late in the pregnancy due to just personal reasons, and Nikki stepped to the plate, and she was awesome. And then working with the Midwives of Methodist was a nice mix between having the baby in a medical setting, which I'm glad I did now, versus having him at home. And then and we also worked with the Des Moines Doula Collective to get our placenta encapsulated for postpartum and things like that. So Des Moines has a great natural mothering and parenting community.
It's gotten very, very. It's strong. It's being taken seriously. It's offering great services, and your review of their work with you is positive. Nice.
Yeah. If anybody ever has any questions, feel free to give them my email address. I'd love to answer any questions and share what I've found out in my progress.
Well, congratulations.
Okay.
Thank
you, Ed.
Appreciate you joining us for this regular segment. And again, maybe at some point when you're ready, we'll have you come in and let us get a good look at this Oliver character.
I know. We'll bring him in. Hopefully my recovery time won't be too long, but it could be 6 to 8 weeks. So we'll see how that goes.
Well, good luck with that. Thank you so much, Nikisha.
Thanks, Ed. Have a great day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
I again want to thank the $1 Million Marathon for sponsoring this segment of our show. They are, this is an amazing event running across the country, 160 marathons, one after the other in relay race fashion. That is pretty incredible. It's a project of Above and Beyond Cancer, raising money for cancer research. Good stuff and worth taking a look at. You can find out more online at coasttocoast.org or com. Anyway, you can figure that out, Coast to Coast online. We'll be back in a few minutes. Dan Kelly's in the studio with us, looking a little bit chipper after a long, drawn-out legislative session. Just back from Washington, D.C., hobnobbing with other state legislators on environmental issues that are worth talking about. We'll be back in just a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I'm administrative manager.
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
If we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, it's your home.
It's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
If you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
Enough said.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Well, I have a Hulk of a guy in the studio with me today, Dan Kelly. Explain to me the difference between Hulk Hogan and the Incredible Hulk.
There's a major difference.
Yeah, a distinction that Judge Stephanie Rose probably wants to, probably is well aware of at this point. But, ouch.
Hulk Hogan is a superhero,
right?
No.
Yeah.
That's true. That's a true or false question. That's a true or false question.
Hulk Hogan is a wrestler.
Okay, good.
Professional wrestler.
And the Incredible Hulk is
Stephanie Rose.
Okay.
No. Is the guy, the green guy? He's a normal guy. And
that's the Incredible Hulk. You don't want to make him angry. He's one of the Avengers.
Yeah.
And Hulk Hogan, well, what he wants you to say your prayers and eat your breakfast. Well,
Stephanie,
right? He's the All-American.
If Stephanie Rose ever gets a reality show, one of those judge shows, instead of Judge Duty, it could be like Judge Hulk.
Right.
Anyway, I don't know. That's something we're going to talk more about, because it is of grave concern that somebody would be, if they are indeed abusing their power like that. All right, Dan Kelly, welcome to the show and welcome back from Washington D.C., where you were
Thank you, Ed.
Sunbathing and staying at fine hotels and hobnobbing with dignitaries.
I met lots of legislators from states all over the country who are interested in making our schools high-performing, healthy facilities. We do a lot of talking about what happens in the classroom, which I think is great, but it's time that we start a conversation in Iowa about the actual classroom and making sure that those facilities are both energy efficient and healthy. It makes no sense to waste money in heating bills and cooling bills if the air is just blown out the door. We've got to do what we can to make those schools more energy efficient. And there are many, many students in the state of Iowa and nationally that suffer from asthma, and there's some things we could do to clean the air in the buildings.
Okay, such as?
Well, we need to make sure that we have clean and effective filtration systems. It's just a few stats I wanted to run by you. 7.1 million children in the United States suffer from asthma. 7.1 million. That's like 2 Iowas plus. That's a huge number.
Yeah.
And
that's just children, not adults.
Yeah. And it's reported that 14 million school days are missed due to asthma. That's time that we need those kids in the classroom learning, not suffering from asthma.
What are the medical costs of that? But I mean, how much of school air quality is blamed? Is how much is that to blame?
Well, I have a stat on that too, Ed.
Good for you.
I went on a stat collecting trip. 40% of the surveyed school nurses throughout the country claim that children and staff are adversely affected by avoidable indoor pollutants. When we have a school that's near a manufacturing area, or a school that's in a downtown area, or even a rural school that is getting the effects of the hog lots and so forth within the building, we need to do what we can to make those schools provide clean air for students. It's just an area, it's a subject that's not talked about much, but if we can make some improvements and cut down on those days missed due to asthma and allergies and so forth.
And days missed on the playground too. I mean,
that's right.
You hate to see any kids suffer with something that's avoidable.
That's right. And I was one of those kids, and I am asthmatic. And yes, I am. And deal with it effectively through prescriptions and so forth. But, I think back to my school days, and I know I missed quite a few due to allergies, and turned out okay. But I could have been all the much smarter, Ed, if I'd been in school those days instead of suffering from those allergies.
You would have been too smart to be a legislator in that case, you know?
I don't know.
I missed several days of school because I was I faked being sick. Anyway,
Right.
But are we making any progress in Iowa, or is this an issue that hasn't even been on the radar?
Well, I've got 5 different bills that deal with energy efficient and healthy schools, and one of those calls for an energy audit of each school building in the state. The Iowa Utilities Board is called upon to establish how these audits are done. But my goal is to get information to local school boards on how energy efficient their school buildings are and what improvements can be made within those buildings. Also, I have a bill calling for when there is new school construction, not mandating LEED standards, but requiring the school board to at least have that as part of the discussion. There are LEED standards for new construction, and then there are standards that can be achieved for existing buildings to retrofit and refit those school buildings. Do you know what the highest expenditure for education is? Of course, personnel.
Sure, teachers.
Right. The second highest is energy costs.
Well, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Now, we've had some school districts have done great things moving toward more renewable sources of energy, but also conservation. We have schools in Ankeny that are operated with geothermal systems. Roosevelt High School in Des Moines just put in a geothermal system.
Right.
We have schools in, I know one of the first schools to install a wind generator was up at Spirit Lake.
Right. And that's another critical step here, utilizing renewable energy sources for school buildings. When I was in Washington with Representative Eisenhart and also Representative Katazovich, we heard about schools in the South that are actually making money off of producing energy. By installing solar panels or geothermal systems. And instead of paying the power companies for the heat and lights and cooling system, they're actually getting a check from their local power company.
So they're selling energy back to the power company.
Yes. Yeah. And I think we need to try to do more of that here in the state of Iowa.
And in some cases, that's not even allowed here in Iowa. It depends on what kind of a utility district you're in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, there's examples of it all over the country. I mentioned the South. There was some great examples we heard from Kentucky on this, and I'd like to see us do more in Iowa. I have some bills I've already introduced, and looking into some other ideas as well.
The question that some are going to ask is, okay, so what is this going to cost? We already pay a lot of money to education. What's it going to cost to make these buildings more efficient energy-wise, and also to make them cleaner in terms of air quality?
Well, the question really should be, what can we save by doing this?
Really? So you think actually it would be a net gain in terms of
energy? We have statistics from the U.S. Green Buildings Council that indicate energy improvements in school buildings could save up to 25%, both on an individual school and school board basis, or nationally that amounts to $2 billion if we were to make the energy improvements in each of the school buildings. We could save $2 billion nationally, and that's enough to hire over 35,000 new teachers. So the question isn't what's this going to cost? The question is what's this going to save us, and what can we do with those savings? So we can improve the education of our students.
But obviously, there's an initial cost in terms of building the geothermal systems, setting up the windmill, the solar panels, the the cleaning the I don't know what it takes to clean the ducts or to set up a new venting system that's going to be more friendly in terms of air quality. I mean, there's got to be a cost in that.
Well, every new idea, every great idea requires an investment. And if we are to make those investments, and I don't have an exact number as to how much that would cost, that's something that each school board needs to take a look at and make determination as to what they can do and how they can do it and when. But that's why I'm calling for an energy audit for each school building, and that information to go to the school board so that they can make those determinations and decide what they can afford to do immediately, and how those savings can be best utilized.
And I don't mean to imply this should just be a matter of how much money do we spend, how much money do we save in energy costs.
Right.
There's also the cost involved with treating kids who are getting asthma because they're exposed to bad air all the time.
Absolutely.
There's also the cost down the road of what we do, how much carbon emissions we save, how much air pollution we save, what kind of positive impacts do we have financially and societally with those kinds of investments. Those are harder to quantify, but they're also really important parts of the equation.
Absolutely, Ed. And this is an area where I think we can find some genuine bipartisan support and some genuine consensus with legislators, educators, parents, and even students become part of the conversation. So not everyone. We're never going to all agree on climate change. We're never going to agree on environmental issues, but certainly everybody wants healthy, smart kids in the state of Iowa and throughout the country. And so if we can focus on energy efficiency and healthy environment within our school buildings, we're going to be doing great things, not only in education, not only to help kids, but I believe also to help pull back the tide of climate change and improve the environment as well.
Good stuff, Dan. And any other particular issues you focused on while you were in Washington?
Well, I have not actually been to Washington, D.C. very much in my life. This was only the third trip I've ever taken out there.
Really?
And it's just a tremendous experience to be in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And one thing that struck me is there's so many young people that live in Washington,
yeah, what's
D.C.
wrong with that? I thought they were all in Portland, Oregon.
No, it's just it's exciting. I mean, these are young, energetic, intelligent people, and
being corrupted by lobbyists.
Yeah, and well, I'm sure there's some of that, but I just in general, there's an optimism about our country, and young people willing to work to make it better from both parties, and that's just exciting to be around in Washington. I was only there for about a day and a half.
So you're saying you spent a lot of time at the Hard Rock Cafe?
I couldn't find the Hard Rock Cafe.
Oh,
found a few other places though.
But the conference was focused specifically on the environmental aspects of school buildings.
The conference was sponsored by the U.S. Green Buildings Council, and the focus was on healthy, high-performing, environmentally and energy efficient school buildings. And I sponsored 5 different bills again, and this organization recognized those bills and wanted me to attend the conference, and I was all too happy to do so.
And will you have some Republican supporters when you introduce this legislation next year?
I've been doing what I can to reach across the aisle, and also to talk to folks in my own caucus, and it seems as though we're gaining some support.
Good. And I assume that over the next few months you'll be out knocking on a lot of doors.
Oh, already started.
Really?
Already started. And I do want to point out that this was a bipartisan conference. There were Republicans and Democrats there from every region of our country.
That's the way to get things done.
There's a Republican from Kentucky that's doing great things, and I'm going to take a look at some of the bills that he's introduced.
Well, nobody does better bipartisan work than you, Dan Kelly.
Well, thank you. I'm really working hard for a reputation and experience and skills in doing so.
All right.
So
good luck in the interim.
Thanks, Ed. I want to mention something real quick.
All right.
If you're looking for something to do later today, at 4 o'clock, come to the Holiday Inn downtown. I'm part of a readers theater group that is presenting the story of Jack Trice, who is
Ruth
of
Ann
course,
Gaines is
Ruth
involved
Ann,
with that.
Ruth
Sure.
Ann Gaines is the director. Also, Representative K.O. Abdul Samad is part of the readers theater. There's some other great people from the Des Moines area who are part of this. And I decided that here's an opportunity to put my theater hat on for a few days.
Who knew that Dan Kelly could act?
Yeah, and I haven't done anything like that for quite a while, but it is a real a great thing that I enjoy. And Jack Trice, that story just hasn't been told enough. He was a great football player, of course, but he was also a real hero. So,
right. Well, good luck with that.
Yeah. So come down to the Holiday Inn downtown at 4 o'clock.
And then, of course, you've got Matt Olaf's event with the Food and Water Watch at what time again?
I think the conference call starts at 7 p.m.
A conference call at 7 p.m. Okay, so, pretty busy afternoon. I do want to thank all of our sponsors, folks, including, again, the $1 Million Marathon. A great event running across the country, 160 marathons to raise money for cancer research. I want to also remind you about the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit coming up on November 9th. If you want to start your own business, expand a business, learn about all the new things you've got to know about regarding taxes and healthcare, a good event to do that at. I want to remind folks to support the local businesses that make this show possible. Community CPA and Associates, taxes, accounting, great place to go. Fighting Burrito, a fantastic place for lunch, but also open. They're open 7 days a week, including for supper, for very affordable custom burritos at 13th and Locust and also in Ames on Welch Ave. Again, Gateway Market is my anchor business sponsor, and I really want to strongly encourage you to support a great local pillar in our community. A fantastic grocery store, but also for catering services and for cafe, breakfast, lunch, and supper. Again, Tinker Heating and Cooling, you've got an air conditioning unit, a furnace rather, that needs repair, and it's amazing to think you might actually need a furnace early June, but it could be true. Hawk Restaurant, also at East 5th and Walnut in the East Village neighborhood. 90% of the food you eat at Hawk comes from local farms. And again, I want to remind you about Ritual Cafe, Tally's Restaurant, Bar, and Catering. And again, if you believe in what we're trying to do on this program, support the businesses that make this program possible. I want to thank Maddie Arrington, my producer. I also want to thank Webcast One Live and remind you that tomorrow we'll be talking more about education, this time about education itself, what goes on in the building. We're going to talk with Andrew Rasmussen of the Des Moines Area Education Association about what happened this year at the State House and how he and his organization feel about that. We'll also talk tomorrow with Tony Bizignano, notorious Yankees fan, former state legislator, and now running again for the Iowa Senate. We'll talk with Tony and with Andrew tomorrow. And again, if you want to call in and join the conversation at any time, you are welcome as well.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of WebcastOneLive.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. but actually it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going, man.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.